Welcome to this week's episode of The Informed. Joining me today, we have number one author Mario Beeks, John Heron, a human rights advocate and family violence lawyer, Sherelle Ainsley, who recently contested in the Victorian election. She's a former athlete and business owner. We have Ryan Smith, who is a long-term veteran in the Victorian Parliament of some 16 years and member for Warrandyte. And we have Ian Cook joining us today, also of I Cook Foods, and he also recently contested in the Victorian state election against Dan Andrews. I'm your host this week. I'm Caroline Council. I'm an accredited family law specialist. This week, disturbingly, I say, we are talking about a trend that's emerging in relation to altering the written words of authors. And we've seen literary greats, French and Andy Griffiths, come out swinging, condemning the removal of phrases like shut up and don't be an idiot from Enid Blyton's famous five. I don't know about you guys, but I actually grew up reading the famous five and I didn't find anything offensive. And I think I've turned out okay. I also like my Shakespeare straight up. I don't like Shakespeare with a twist of lemon or olives. The other person that's had their work interfered with is Roald Dahl, and that is very concerning because one of the examples of changes in one of his books, he depicts witches as being bald. Well, even that is no longer acceptable because that has been changed in his work to read, and I quote, "There are plenty of other reasons why women might wear wigs, and there is certainly nothing wrong with that." So Mario Beeks, what is wrong with changing the words of authors, and what's going on?
There's a tragedy, like a great tragedy, literally a great tragedy, in respect to all this one. I don't understand that today thinking they're applying on authors who wrote the books 50, 60, 70, even 100 years ago. It was a different times, different behavior. It was different lifestyle and everything else. As an author of the several books, I'll be very, very upset to somebody change my wording because it reflects my opinion, my feelings, my emotions, the time I'm living in and everything else. Now, there's only one system in the world who tried to change the history by rewriting it's a communism to suit narrative today and the future actions. And what they're doing right now, it makes me so upset because I already have that now fringes with my own son who's 21 years old, who's telling me that everything in my past was wrong, like we do everything wrong. And it's like, it cannot be wrong, everything what I lived through. And, that was my time. So your time, you should have your authors. No telling authors I was born with, they're wrong. Why don't you have your authors and write something new? So I think it's deliberately purposely being put into public, this debate, because I can see a generation fight. So I don't want to use the abusive language, but I say like I'm very, very upset with what I'm seeing, what's happening. And I think it's totally wrong. I don't know who that suits, but it doesn't suit the generations who grow up and read those books.
Brian, you work in the world where not literature, but legislation is altered, and it's usually altered according to the government of the day for the common good. That is a vastly different concept from altering somebody's thoughts and opinions.
I think that this is abhorrent. I really do. I think that when writers write, as Mario rightly said, it's about articulating the thoughts of the day, whether that's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 100 years ago, and it sprouts emotions. It makes sure that you understand, what the time was. I think, if we're so fragile that we can't read a written word and not get upset by it, then we're in, there's no hope for us. I read a lot. The one book that I couldn't read that I put down was American Psycho. It was probably the only book that I've never finished. But I don't want it to be changed. If I'm getting upset by it, you put it down and don't read it again. It's that simple. If we are that fragile that we can't handle the written word, that is a real problem for our future.
So what are we doing to our children if we are trying to wrap them so seriously in so much cotton wool that they cannot countenance a view, an attitude, a character, an opinion other than that which has been blanded by the people with the black pens?
It's the perfect word, just blanded. It makes reading just a mediocre activity that you're just not going to get any emotions by. You should be experiencing emotion when you read. It's that simple.
So, Sherelle, this must be sending shivers down your spine, given that you've had probably the nightly task of reading a bedtime story. What's your opinion about this blanding, this revisionism, if you will?
Look, my opinion is that it seems so, I guess, contradictory, right? We have all these images. I read books to my son. I also watch a bit of TV with him, and he's bombarded with these images of trying to sell and push things down his throat, which I think is more damaging, in my opinion. I've got nieces and nephews who I've been reading with them for their school books. There was one book, and I can't remember the name of it, but Ryan just sort of touched a nerve there, where it was a school book that they were reading for school, and I was helping them prepare. And I was thinking, oh my God, the language in this, I'm not joking, it was F-bombs everywhere. Now, that's a prescribed text for that school. And we're talking about books that are saying, shut up and things like that. Now, I think that I want my son, you can't have a vanilla, language. He has to learn what is right, what is wrong, when to use the right words. And how do you learn that? How does a child learn that if they don't have any exposure to it? So there's all this, on one side, this bombarding of imagery, whether it be in these textbooks that my nieces and nephews are reading, or even the video clips that they have, the music clips that they have. We have all of this bombarding on one side, and yet we're trying to get rid of shut up out of a book. It just seems so contradictory to me.
How do you convey a character in a book that's maybe coarse, of low education? You write as your writing would demonstrate how they talk in the real world. And if you can't even do that, then you can't demonstrate a character in a book that is of that nature.
And a great example of that, I read this in school, was Of Mice and Men. I think a lot of people probably have read that. And my nieces and nephews were reading that for school as well. And it was quite an interesting thing when I was reading it with them to try to explain the slang that the characters had, because they didn't have great English. And so that book reflected that. So I thought that was a great thing, that they had to actually use their minds to actually work out or understand that the language has changed over time.
The point has also been made that there's so many editions of these books out there in the community, that even if they're changing for future editions, as I said, are we going to see the teachers in schoolrooms having to pull out the black pen and literally cover up words that are deemed by someone to be offensive? How do you control information? And Sherelle, you've correctly talked about video clips. Let's not even talk about computer games and what goes on in computer games, for heaven's sake. So I'm wondering, given that Enid Blyton has fallen out of popularity, and given that Roald Dahl has been condemned for his anti-Semitic sentiments, I'm wondering if there are some authors who are allowed to drop the F-bomb and some authors who aren't. Are we actually seeing discernment between authors?
I think you're right there, Carol, and I think also that what they're doing, it's part of the control of the curriculum. It's part of the way they want you to think and the way they think you should think. And you've got a minority telling us what that is. I mean, that's what Mario's touching on. The communists did it extremely well. They got rid of religion. If they could have rewritten the Bible, I'm sure they would have. Probably too big a text for them. I think also that you have to, from my point of view, the work of Enid Blyton and the work of Roald Dahl and others is a form of art. So if we're going to start tampering with art, does that mean we get Dante's Inferno and take the demons out because we don't like it? Or change the Mona Lisa because someone perceives her as not being what we expect in her anymore? I think it's quite disrespectful of the artists, particularly those that have already passed away.
Look, if you go in that path to create some dystopian society, and we want everything to be surgically clean and aesthetically, on our eyes and on everything. I'm just wondering who suits that, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't matter. This is the problem, you know. People in Australia, they have the opinion about them, you know, how we should live the life here and everything else. But sooner or later, people's going to leave Australia. They're going to travel. They're going to meet other cultures. Not every culture, not every country across the globe is going to have the pen, you know, the black pen and across the words in the books, because they see the value in this, you know. So how people going to behave? They're going to come in other country and say, like, you know, you need to change the books. It doesn't work that way. It's going to create more frictions and more frictions. And I'm trying to understand who is those who deciding to this be done, because we saw recently, like, doesn't have nothing to do with this topic, but Silicon Valley Bank has gone down. And the last 2 months, they spent so much money and time, the head of risk, on creating the workplace, you know, equality and everything else. 2 months, money, everything else. Then he saw the bank is going down. Now the people asking, what's happening? Who approved this? Now, the same goes with the book set. Why I need to be damaged, or you or anybody else, with what we read then? Because it looks like that we need to reread things to suit somebody else. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
I think we're missing a larger point. It's not actually the content, right? So we get hung up on that, and you go down the path that they want you to go down. It's the ability to actually do that. This has been going on at universities for a good 2 decades. So how it works there in university, my last degree amongst 5 was law. So what I learned quickly is that I wrote what the lecturer wanted to hear from a political bias perspective, right? Not the facts. The 1 essay or 2 essays that I wrote, the facts, I was failed, right? And if I wrote what the lecturer wanted to hear in the utopia, then I'd get a high distinction, right? I grew up with David Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 and George Orwell's 1984. Now, Fahrenheit 451 is the closest that we're at or hurtling towards there. The thing about, and this is a really interesting point, I really like the film, Oscar Werner's film, Fahrenheit 451 from the 60s, right? Now, they did a remake recently, and the remake is an example of what's happening now. All of the cast was woke. All of the cast was ethnically selected in a manner that actually went against Fahrenheit 451. And if you come back to George Orwell and Newspeak, what he basically says there about thought crimes, if you whittle Newspeak down to reducing language, thought crime is impossible because you've got nothing to say.
So, John, are we 2 steps away also from the brown shirts and the burning of books?
It's not going to manifest itself in the open like it was in the digital age. So that's out the window. And again, having worked in communist countries, basically, or even when I was there in the last days of the Soviet Union, the one place that didn't have queues was the propaganda bookstore, right? So in Russian, it's kniga. So what happens there is that everyone just knows what the propaganda is. You just accept what it is. And we're pretty close to that in Victoria. Nobody tunes on anymore. Andrew speaks, no one says anything. You're at university, you don't go and protest or you don't turn up to an enlightening lecture at university. Anyone that might be controversial is shouted down and attacked at the university. Now, that's the crucible of free thought, and that's been under siege for 2 decades.
That's very interesting what you say, John. Look, it's like that movie and the book, I never read the book, but I saw that movie, both versions, Fahrenheit 451. And Carol, I think you're right. I think we are very close to that thing. We are very close now to delete everything and cancel everything what doesn't suit narrative. But my question is, who are those who deciding on our behalf what we can read, what we can't read? Because nobody can tell me that our authors 200 years ago or 150 years ago, 50 years ago, are those ones who created the problems in the world. The books, as the books, are there to be read. And we all have the avant-garde people, and we all going to have, as John says, people in university who's going to be woke, never had a problem, but suddenly we have the problem deleting our history or rewriting the history. It doesn't make a sense. For who?
But I agree with John though as well. Like I've got a son who I'm working out what school he's going to go to, and it's not just at the elite or the diploma level. It's at primary school level. You got to work out what school to send your child to, because there's so many other contents that they're trying to, put onto the children. I hesitate with using the word groom the children. I really fear for that. It's a real stress for me to think, where is my son going to be educated and what content are they going to be shown? So it's not just in the books, like John said, it's the whole control of what they want our future generations to be brainwashed with, I guess.
Yeah,
so just briefly on that.
Our kids' sexuality every day, as long as they don't say shut up.
Yeah, exactly right.
I've represented people that have exited cults in Victoria, and the one thing that they have in common is the fact that they control that which is read by the people within the cult. And usually the written word is transposed with cartoons, because that way you minimize words and you present images. I found it very disturbing that any other access to any other information was removed. I don't think we're quite there, but this is the trend. This is what I believe that we are seeing when the small few decide what it is that we are going to be reading, and the rewriting of that which already exists. So it is about control. It is about a one-point view. It is Oscar Werner's Fahrenheit 451. I am probably more deeply disturbed by this than most of the other conversations that we've had this year and last, because words matter. The written word, the artistic expression at a given point in time in history is valid, and this is an act of invalidation, if you will. So I share your concern, Sherelle, about how do you forge a path for a child if you can't find anywhere that is offering anything different than the one voice, the one view.
And choice matters as much as words matter. I mean, I should be able to read whatever I want. I should be able to read my kids whatever I want to read them. It's not up to, as Mario said, this arbitrary body to tell me what I can and can't read and what I can and can't be affected by. And I agree. I don't know who this group is that seem to be telling us what we can and can't say, and it seems to change on a weekly basis. The people who stand in judgment of everything that we do and say. It's got to stop. But unfortunately, we're going to continue to go down the path until people stop being so apathetic about it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little bit, sorry. I was going to say, I'm a little bit naughty. Anyone that wants some traditional books for their kids, we've still got the Noddy series. We've still got all of those old series. My parents have kept them. So, and I'm really pleased, even though they're taboo, they still have a lot of value.
Look, that fits very well what you said now, Cheryl. And I say, in past 3 years, we saw that everything goes online. Our life is online. Our life is on sale online and everything. And we had a less and less retail exposure, for the books, for the many other things. And it's become a rarity. Like I was in Melbourne a few weeks ago, as someone and I saw this bookstore near my hotel. It's some antique bookstore. It's a beautiful shop, I mean. I went inside, the lady, she says to me, most of these books is people just really can't sell because we cannot find another copy. And I was thinking, selling the books? She says, no, because we can't find another copy. And I was like, okay, well, the Charles Dickens, the original, some things, right? And I was like, that's very interesting, because slowly the books has been withdrawn, from public, like physical books, from, like, I don't know, writers 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. So that's what the problem is. We have the physical now missing the books from the shelves. Older ones, like not the last 20 years, maybe, but this one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when the classics are gone,
classics, yeah, that's the word. Sorry,
from millennia, they're the first ones to go. All of the classics that I grew up with, Park Shakespeare, but Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia, etc. All of these, and Plato, the Republic, Socrates, Last Days of Socrates, all of these classics that our civilization is actually founded on, believe it or not, because there has to be roots. It's It's picking up, where's Western civilization's roots? They come back to things like ancient Greeks and Rome to a degree. For thought, for democracy, voting, universities were first originated there. As Sherelle said, I wouldn't send my 11-year-old to the local, I call it secular school, for the love of money. And there's no way I'd absolutely do that. And I had a discussion with a parent where she questioned why I sent her to a Catholic school. I went on about values of Christianity, which wasn't going down really well. And then I said, so are you happy at the secular school? And she went, yes. And I said, what is it? The philosophy of me? And that was the last time we saw her. Oh, by the way, she had one of the Jim Chalmers PhDs.
But it's disturbing when people can't even countenance the other point of view. The fact that you have a different point of view to me, but we won't engage, we won't discuss. If you want to work out the day that intellectual pursuits started to die, it's when it becomes offensive for us to debate. If it's offensive for us to hold a different point of view, then we are seriously in trouble.
It's not the content. It's about the ability to do it, and how literally people give them too much credit. They're not sitting around like a cabal. I don't buy that. But it's a group of individuals way out of their depth, and they turn around and they go, I got away with that. Let's try this.
That's right.
So let's go for this book. Wow, I got away with that. Let's do another one. It's not no, I'll write the content later. A bit like Newspeak, but someone like Winston's writing the content. Who cares about the content? Let's just do it. That's where it comes in. It's not, I want to change because I don't want idiot. It's a bad, offensive word. That's just in communism, that the material that's said doesn't mean anything, right? It's actually the ability to control.
Yes, you're right. And I think it's just said is that it's that ability for a minority to tell you, and as you said, Carolyn, as soon as you come up with a differing opinion, instead of the open, free debate that we should be having, you then get labelled. You're either a racist, it's hate speech, it's this or it's that. And so you become demonized. And the more they demonize you, the more they isolate you. And so it's not spoken about. And then what do we have? We have the boiling of the frog. It's just slowly, little bit by little bit, until they get away with some sort of ultimate control. And that's not conspiracy theories or anything. That's just what is happening.
Yeah.
The difference between conspiracy theory and the truth is a time, and we saw this in Victoria. And I was yesterday shocked, that we discussing the books, the knowledge, as a John says, how often we can hear it. All these gurus and public speakers are referring back to some of the old Greek philosophers, or even the Roman. None. We have the modern type philosophy, right? Hustling, grinding, all these things. But what everybody just ignoring the fact actually that the life itself by design is going sideways. The prices are going soaring up. The things are going out of control. Are we controlling the couple words in a book? That doesn't make a sense for nobody. And I said this before. The moment when I saw that Santa Claus is being cancelled, which I still believe I'm 51 years old, I said to myself, this doesn't make a sense. Why would you take it something what is it's something like greatest thing for every child, to be happy for the Christmas, be happy for the Santa Claus, some presents. It wasn't good. It didn't suit many people, and I'm upset that even that thing was being removed out of the people. Now we have what's it called, Harmony Day, whatever they call this now. So
it's happy holidays, everyone. Again, that whole blanding, that whole you're not allowed to countenance another perspective, another point of view, another different type of celebration. So instead of actually acknowledging difference is what actually makes us unique as a species, I believe. The variety. If you think in terms of physics, we are all the one thing anyway. We're all stardust. So why wouldn't you celebrate difference? Why let a woke minority control and bland us? What makes their view better than ours? It's not better than ours, the rest of us. So
3,000 years of Darwinism is gone like this overnight. Just a pen and paper, it's gone.
I had a really good comment from Barr, the ex-US Attorney General. and he was talking about the foundations of society in our society, that before there was moral codes and there was understanding of how the society was built. So there was like a right and wrong, shall we say. You do not behave this way because it is wrong and for these particular reasons. Being oppressing minorities is a bad thing. That's morally wrong, right? Now it's a situation of you will do this, otherwise I'll penalise you, right? Now that is growing. So just the use of minorities to say, don't treat minorities and say this because blah, right? It's not even that it's bad. It's, we'll just omit it, right? So again, it's got nothing to do with the content. It's all the foundations of society are out the window. So society is a large ship without a rudder and engine at the moment. It's just like motoring through the ocean. It's going to crash on land.
But also the content actually is a teacher. So again, if you leave the content in with people that might have a different view or an offensive view, that creates the opportunity to discuss. Why would they hold this view? Why don't you hold the same view? What do you find offensive about it? You take the offense out. You take out the opportunity for analytical thought around, well, why is that? And why would they express that? What has been their life experience? That's what concerns me also, that the blanding removes the opportunity for the intellectual engagement with the content.
I'd just like to point out something that John was saying. I think it was really resonating with me around my son. He's coming to that age where he's pushing the boundaries. He goes to the boundaries, he looks around and he pushes and he pushes. And it's my job as a parent to bring him back, right? That's how you learn. They push the boundaries. You say, no, that's not right. And you bring them back. And this is what you're saying. I think, John, you're saying is that they're pushing the boundaries, but there's no one saying, hang on, bring it back. They just keep pushing the boundaries. They keep saying, taking things away. They keep, taking the words away or keep pushing their agenda. And as you said before, no one's saying, stop, that's not okay. And as a society, I think we need to come together and say, stop, and let's have those differences allowed.
Let's have a conversation.
It's a political shift.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I also think that when you have a look at those minorities, they're still almost like an industry. They're still trading on some perceived oppression from many years ago. And, I don't care who you sleep with, I don't care how you dress, etc., but don't then start forcing your opinion upon me. Having clear debate is, as you described, is important. But then I think to myself, these people have to keep doing what they're doing, because if you resolve the problem of oppression of a minority, then you have no industry.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're out of work.
Exactly.
So they've got to keep pushing that boundary.
I agree with
I always refer to the family violence industry where I work in, where you're trying to get people at the coalface, taking women to the police station, getting them turned away after they've been beaten up. And on the other thing, there's 15,000, 20,000 people employed there. You don't see them during the day. Now, remember, Caroline, where will you and I be in a month's time?
Vietnam.
All right. So it's a classic example where you've had 250,000 people died in re-education camps after the war 50 years ago. But you'll see a vibrant life. You'll see infrastructure being built that can't be built in Victoria anymore. All right. And you'll question why that is. But the one thing you don't do, what's that?
Not the government.
Yeah, you don't question the regime, otherwise you vanish.
Yeah.
Right? So life's great. Don't question the regime or thought, and it's fine.
John, can I tell you that the greatest awakening for me, and I was 59 when they closed us, was if what had happened to I Cook Foods happened in Vietnam or in China, I'd have shut that up. I'd have said nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I expected that in our society that I could come out and say, hey, this was wrong. Well, but no, it's almost the same now. Either you're with this regime, the Andrews government, or they will find a way to get to you.
Let me clarify what you would have done, Ian. There's two things you would have done, right? You would have, what you just said, kept quiet. And the second thing, what mostly happens in communist countries, you'd turn up to Albo's office with a briefcase with $2 million in cash.
Right? Correct.
That's what happens.
Don't you worry, Ian. You're gonna be soon dealer of the happiness because
That's
the
right.
food
So if you
becomes
turn
a
up in Vietnam, China, and you got a problem like that,
Yeah.
turn up with
I'm just
briefcase.
worried for the John and Carol in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So guys, La Libertad, you know what I mean? Just long live the Communist Party. I'll give you some songs as well, so it's gonna be okay.
Fantastic. Now, what I want to hear from each of you, it's fair, and thank you, John, because I'm a great fan of Oscar Werner as an actor. I just want you to name the book. I'll give you a little minute to think about it. I'll start with me because it's a very small book and that's probably all my brain can handle at this age. Name the book that you would memorize if the risk was that this book was going to be removed from the planet. And mine would be The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon, only because it's weird and it's wacky and I loved it. So John, what book would you commit to memory?
Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Brilliant. Ian.
Mine's a toss-up. It would either be Kestrel for a Knave, or Animal Farm. So I'd probably try and memorise both of them because they're not particularly long books.
Oh, now you make me feel guilty about the size of mine. Mario, apart from your books.
Look, I'll say that the children. Well, I will use the children version of the Bible because the Bible is a document of human society, and that's like there's a children version I have at home. For all these years, it's like 20 pages. I'll try to memorize that one. So for me,
Sherelle.
I really like a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's for me about following your path and following. And so it's the one book that I keep going back to when I sort of feel like I'm at a crossroads. So that's probably the one I would go with.
Ryan, you have the last book.
It's a book called Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, and it's about the breaking down of children to make them into warriors. It's got a backdrop of philosophy to it, but it's a great book about growth.
Well, thank you all for this very interesting discussion this week on The Informed.